I use a plot grid to both outline my book and revise my book. And in today's video, I'm gonna walk you through exactly how I use plot grids to get to the bottom of the issues in my first draft and use it to see the big picture of my book and create a revision plan from it. If you don't know what a plot grid is, I recommend going over and watching my video explaining exactly what a plot grid is, because I'm not gonna talk about that in this video. In this video, we will be solely focused on revision. Is this method gonna work for all writers? No, but no writing method works for every writer. My goal with this video is just to share with you a tool in my writing toolbox that has helped me out of some tricky situations, in case you are also in a situation where something like this could be useful and you want to try it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the plot grid that I created for book 2 of the They Stay series, They Whisper, that one with the yellow cover right there, and go through each of the different versions of the plot grid that I created for different drafts. I did this for many more books in that series. I just don't have access to all of my files for some reason. I don't really know where they went. This always happens to me when I finish a book project. I can't find all of my historical files because maybe like I've worked in the same file for multiple months and changed it, so I'd have to go through the version history or whatever, but this is the one that I could find, so this is the one we're gonna use. Because I'm using a plot grid for the They Stay series as an example, there may be some spoilers for the series in this, but there also might not be, because these early plot grids, like I was reading through this plot grid and I was reading through some of the subplots that I had, and I have full characters in this plot grid that never appeared in the series that I don't even remember ever creating, so. Okay, so this is the plot grid for They Whisper. This was the first plot grid that I created when I was trying to create that book, and it is pretty big. This gives you a pretty good idea of like how many columns and how many plots that I use. I have full columns for every character arc, so Shiloh, Francesca, Miles, and Jonah are the 4 main characters of the series. I have absolutely no memory of who Kennedy was, but apparently she was a character in the first iteration of They Whisper. She did not make it in the published book. So I keep track of my scene beats. These are just basically plot points. My chapter number, the time that this happened. Clearly, like, I'm not really focusing on the number or time yet in very early stages of my plot grids, just because I just have to figure out what's going to happen before I figure out when it happens. I usually put everything on a timeline in draft 2 or 3. Then I have my main plot. This is about as much text as I write in my main plot. I get this question a lot about how much text somebody should put in their like main plot column, and what I always tell people is that you should put as much text in there as is personally helpful to you. I'm gonna zoom in on this so it's easier for you to read, because if I make it really, really big, then you can't read a single thing on the plot grid. So it kind of differs how much text I put in each of these boxes depending on the scene. So sometimes it's a really, really quick sentence summary. Sometimes I'm trying to figure out what's happening in a scene, so I will write a little bit more in it. Some scenes are very simple, some scenes are more layered. It really varies. You just need to put as much text as is going to be personally helpful to you. If it's not going to help you to describe a scene in extreme detail, if you don't need that much detail when you think of the scene and you already have a very clear vision, just put 1 or 2 sentences. But if you want more structure and something with a little more meat to remind yourself what is going to happen in that scene, then write more. So here, these are all my subplots. So things like corn whispering is hilarious because it only appears 1 time in this. Kids in danger, there are different like mystery subplots. This is really funny because this is not actually what ended up happening in the final book. Different iterations of like ghosts going missing, which is something that was also happening in draft 1 that didn't make it in the final book. Then we have all of the character arcs, so we track how the characters change throughout all of these different scenes. And then these are my relationship subplots. So I didn't fully fill all of these out. There is a lot of blank in here. Typically what happens when I start writing a plot grid is that I will start excited about the plot grid, and then I will reach a point where I just have to start writing it, and I will abandon my plot grid slightly too early, jump the gun a little bit, and then I will have big gaps in my plot grid at the beginning. But it's okay because we're going to be using the same tool for revision. And the plot grid goes down pretty long, so I put a decent amount of detail here in the character arc section and in understanding how my characters change. This is a book I wrote very quickly. I published They Whisper 6 months after They Stay, which is the shortest turnaround that I've ever had from a book that I've published. But I scrapped scrapped my entire draft 3 months before They Whisper's release day, and I started from scratch and wrote that entire book from scratch right before release. And so all of this in this plot grid did not end up in the final version. But this is an example of like what mine would look like before I write a draft one. But before we continue, I want to briefly talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is DABBLE. DABBLE is a writing software built specifically for writers that makes writing and organizing your book so much easier than traditional word processors. It was created to be user-friendly, combining intuitive features with a distraction-free interface to help you stay focused while writing. You get everything you need in one clean interface: a manuscript editor, character notes, world-building tools, goal tracking, a distraction-free full screen mode, and a way to create plot grids within the program for tracking your story beats. I am such a big fan of the plot grid feature. It allows you to visually plot out your novel and gives you an overview of the entire story structure, letting you see at a glance if your pacing is off or if a character disappears for too many chapters. Even if you're a pantser, DABBLE will add scenes to your plot grid as you write so you can use it during your revisions. If you use DABBLE, you don't even need to do what I tell you to do in this video. You don't need to go and create a plot grid for that matches your book when you're revising it. DABBLE will automatically update your plot grid for you so that all you have to do when it's time to revise is move things around and change things, which is amazing. DABBLE works on any device, including Mac and Windows. You can access all your projects on mobile when writing on the go, and you'll get all new updates for free with your subscription, like a big 3.0 release coming soon. Plus, it automatically backs up your work to the cloud so you never lose progress. And you can export to Microsoft Word in standard manuscript format with 2 clicks when you're ready to send your manuscript out. DABBLE is more than just a writing tool, too. They have a free community of thousands of authors, dabblers and non-dabblers alike, host events, writing sprints and challenges, and have hundreds of free and premium writing resources, articles, courses, and more. If you're interested in trying DABBLE, use code CLAIRE for 15% off a year subscription for first-time subscribers. The link is in the description. So then down here you can see I have different tabs for different drafts. So once I had this super messy draft and I was ready to revise the book, I created another plot grid. So you'll notice that my main plot column is the same, roughly. We'll get to the green text in a second, but all of these are completely different. That's because after writing draft 2, I did some thinking about what I actually wanted the story to be, because a lot of the times what happens when I write a book is I'll have an initial idea and I'll write a draft, and that draft will realize what I want the story not to be and what I want, like what things didn't feel right and what things, like what ideas ended up being better than the ones I had in my original version of the book. And so then I will be able to think about what I want the main subplots to be, and then I will write them all in my new plot grid, completely ignoring all the ones that came before and writing out all the new ones. After I finish writing draft 1, what I will do is I will create an exact copy of it. So I will duplicate this sheet. I'll say like move or copy. I'll make a copy, and this will be an exact copy of this one because I like to save iterations of the book. And this plot grid is the way that I can make all of those changes to the book without actually touching the prose itself. So I can see the book from a bird's eye perspective. But a lot of times what happens is I will start writing a book with the plot grid, and then I will completely deviate from that outline and go write something completely different. So the first thing that I do after I copy this original plot grid into a new draft 2 tab is I will change the plot grid to be the exact thing that I ended up writing. I want the plot grid now to exactly mirror what is on the page. The point of the plot grid is to give you a bird's eye perspective of your manuscript, and so you need to have your plot grid match your manuscript. I don't think I actually did that completely here in this particular example, but best practice, this is what you do. You write out all of your actual subplots. So if you deleted a character while you were writing draft 1, you completely delete them from the plot grid. If a new subplot is introduced that wasn't in your plot grid, you add it onto your plot grid. You go through all of these boxes and you type up exact summaries of what you have written. And once your entire plot grid mirrors what you have written, then you can go in and you can start to change it. What I love about plot grids is it allows you to see the big picture. If you've mirrored everything that you've written, you'll be able to very easily see if there are big gaps in your storytelling. So let's look at my love triangle. So this is my column for my love triangle in They Whisper, and I color-coded it to blue. This is, I think, where she's leaning towards one guy, and red where she's leaning towards the other guy. And I can color-code these chapters to like be which side she's leaning more towards. And if I've typed up exactly what I've written, I might be able to see, okay, here there is no text. This is maybe a big gap where the love triangle isn't mentioned at all. Or this is another big gap where the love triangle is not mentioned at all. Or maybe there is a huge gap between this scene and this this scene and I should add a little bit of tension in here to show the character's mind changing or their thought process shifting a little bit between this character or this scene and that scene. It allows me to identify the issues, the gaps, the things that are messy, instead of having to scroll up and down and getting overwhelmed by just how big and unwieldy my document is. So that's a way that it easily identifies problems for me. And on top of that, usually when I'm writing a first draft, I'll have like a list of revision notes to myself. Like I'll write something and I'll know that something's not working. And so I'll write it in a document and be like, fix this later, fix this in draft 2, change this, rewrite this, make sure that this aligns with this that I've just introduced now in chapter 22, make sure it's not the first time it's mentioned, mention it earlier, things like that. And then I can go in and make those changes in this plot grid. So what I did in this particular plot grid is I color coded it. So things that I added, I put in green text. So things that I wanted to change, things that I wanted to make a little bit different, things that I wanted just to add to the document, I'd put in green. But you don't have to. You can keep everything in black text or you can color code it in red text. I used to want to put green things for things I wanted to add and then red things for what I wanted to delete, but I found that it was just easier to delete the things that I wanted to delete from the plot grid because my aim was to make the plot grid mirror the version of the book that I wanted to create. I can move things around really easily in the plot grid and it's harder for me to move things around in the actual manuscript. So this was super helpful. I also created a column for revision notes. So if there were things that I had written down while I was drafting, things that I had thought of that I needed to change, I could put them in each of these buckets so that they corresponded to the chapter like they were in. I didn't use plot grids when I wrote the love trials, but I still did this. Like I'd separate all of my revision notes that I wrote to myself and separate them by chapter, and then I'd paste them at the top of the chapter heading so they were really easy to see like what changes I had to make to every single chapter. But I liked to do this in the plot grid. So you see there's like a ton of green, there are a ton of things that I wanted to add, that I wanted to change. Red, I guess I used red for notes. You can color code it however you want to, however it makes the most sense to you. And once you go through it and you've written all of these changes that you want, all of these different things you wanted to add, all these things you wanted to delete, deleted all the things that don't make sense anymore, then you can use this blueprint to inform your next draft. So you can take every single row of your plot grid and then open that up next to the chapter in your book that it corresponds to, and then you can change the chapter in your book to be like to reflect and be that version of the chapter that you've written about in your plot grid, and that it does all of the things that you outlined for yourself in the plot grid and that you've made all of those changes. So the way that it helps you revise is really just by pointing out big gaps in your storytelling and giving you a tool to make the revisions outside of your manuscript before you make the changes in your manuscript. It gives you a blueprint. You still have to decide like what you want to change, what you want to revise, what issues that you've identified, but this just gives you a way to enact those changes and stay organized, because otherwise things can get very overwhelming. And you can do this for as many drafts as you want. So I did one for draft 3 too. So I would have copied draft 2, created a whole new plot grid for draft 3, and filled it in based on the book that I wanted to create. So here's a version of the plot grid that I made for draft 3. It's not color-coded, but this, I believe, is me creating the plot grid for one of the more final versions of the draft that I did. I remember that my final outline was linear and in Word, but this was my last plot grid before I created that linear outline. So the method for using a plot grid to outline is write a plot grid for draft 1, write draft 1, copy your plot grid from draft 1, rename it draft 2, write down everything that you wrote in draft 1 in your plot grid called draft 2, exactly as you wrote it, and then make all of your revisions that you want to make to your book in your draft 2 plot grid. Then write draft 2 in accordance with your plot grid for draft 2 and repeat as necessary. This is also a really great time if you wanted to work with a developmental editor, or if you wanted to run your book through a virtual beta reader or virtual developmental editor program and take feedback from that. You can write out everything that you did in draft 1 in your draft 2 plot grid, and then you can implement the feedback that you get from your human developmental editor or your virtual manuscript assessment and and move things around in your manuscript to fix the things that feedback pointed out to you, and then you can work on implementing them in your manuscript. All this is just a tool to keep things organized for you, and I get serious writer's block if things get disorganized and I start to feel if things are muddy, that they get overwhelming and stressful and things feel impossible and I don't know how to continue on and everything just feels like it's a mess and I don't even want to touch it because I get overwhelmed. And this is a very actionable way that I can keep things organized. So that's how I like to revise my books, using a plot grid. If you're interested in using my plot grid template, I have a plot grid template on Google Sheets linked in the description of this video. You can make a copy of it and then customize it and use it to outline your own books. If you have any questions for how I like to revise my books or methods that I use to isolate things that I want to change, please drop me a comment down below. I would be super happy to share my experience. If you have a second, I would be super grateful if you could give this video a like and also subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning author who makes weekly videos sharing actionable writing tips that helps me make my own writing better. I'm the author of the 5-book paranormal thriller They Stay series, as well as The Love Trials, which is coming out on April 28th and is currently up for pre-order. I'd be so grateful if you pre-ordered a copy. It would help me so much, and I'm so grateful to everybody who already has. The pre-order link is also in the description of this video. I hope you have a fantastic week, everybody, and as always, happy writing.